and other sheep I have, which are not of this fold. Them also I must bring, and they shall hear my voice, and there shall be one fold and one shepherd. Therefore doth my Father love me, because I lay down my life that I might take it again. No man taketh it from me, but I lay it down of myself. I have power to lay it down, and I have power to take it again. This command received I of my Father.
Hello, good morning. Welcome to Line by Line Bible Studies. We're continuing today in the Gospel of John, the final chapter. Who knows, we may even finish it today. I can't tell. Who knows what's going to happen. Anyway, so let's begin by reading the chapter. After these things, Jesus showed himself again to the disciples at the Sea of Tiberias. And on this wise showed he himself. And on this wise showed he himself. Why does it talk like that? There were together Simon Peter and Thomas called Didymus, and Nathanael of Cana of Galilee, and the sons of Zebedee, and two other of his disciples. Simon Peter saith unto them, I go a-fishing. They say unto him, We also go with thee. They went forth and entered into a ship immediately, and that night they caught nothing. But when the morning was now come, Jesus stood on the shore. But the disciples knew not that it was Jesus. Then Jesus saith unto them, Children, have ye any meat? They answered him, No. And he said unto them, Cast the net on the right side of the ship, and ye shall find. They cast therefore, and now they were not able to draw it for the multitude of fishes. Therefore that disciple whom Jesus loved saith unto Peter, It is the Lord. Now when Simon Peter heard that it was the Lord, he girt his fisher's coat unto him, for he was naked, and did cast himself into the sea. And the other disciples came in a little ship, for they were not far from land, but as it were 200 cubits, dragging the net with fishes. As soon as they were come to the land, they saw a fire of coals there, and fish laid thereon, and bread. Jesus saith unto them, Bring the fish which ye have now caught. Simon Peter went up and drew the net to land full of great fishes, 153. And for all there were so many, yet was not the net broken. Jesus saith unto them, Come and dine. And none of the disciples durst ask him, Who art thou? Knowing that it was the Lord. Jesus then cometh and taketh bread, and giveth them, and fish likewise. This is now the third time Jesus showed himself to his disciples, after that he was risen from the dead. So when they had dined, Jesus saith to Simon Peter, Simon, son of Jonas, Simon, son of Jonas, lovest thou me more than these? He saith unto him, Yea, Lord, thou knowest that I love thee. He saith unto him, Feed my lambs. He saith unto him again the second time, Simon, son of Jonas, lovest thou me? He saith unto him, Yea, Lord, thou knowest that I love thee. He saith unto him, Feed my sheep. He saith unto him the third time, Simon, son of Jonas, lovest thou me? Peter was grieved, because he said unto him the third time, Lovest thou me? And he said unto him, Lord, thou knowest all things. Thou knowest that I love thee. Jesus saith unto him, Feed my sheep. Verily, verily, I say unto thee, when thou wast young, thou girdest thyself, and walkest whither thou wouldest. But when thou shalt be old, thou shalt stretch forth thy hands, and another shall gird thee, and carry thee whither thou wouldest not. This spake he, signifying by what death he should glorify God. And when he had spoken this, he saith unto him, Follow me. Then Peter, turning about, seeth the disciple whom Jesus loved following, which also leaned on his breast at supper, and said, Lord, Lord, which is he that betrayeth thee? Peter seeing him, saith to Jesus, Lord, what shall this man do? Jesus saith unto him, If I will that he tarry till I come, what is that to thee? Follow thou me. Or follow thou me. Then went this saying abroad among the brethren, that disciple should not die, Yet Jesus said not unto him, He shall not die, but if I will that he tarry till I come, what is that to thee? This is the disciple which testifieth of these things and wrote these things. And we know that his testimony is true. And there are also many other things which Jesus did, the which, if they should be written every one, I suppose that even the world itself should not contain the books that should be written. Amen. So they're confirming the disciple whom Jesus loved is the author of John. And that's why we presume often that it is John. The one piece of evidence, the strongest piece of evidence against that idea, and again, don't freak out. This is a debatable point, because it's no secret that the titles to the books are later, just like the chapter divisions, just like the verse numbers, they're not part of the original autographs, which means the ones written by the apostles and prophets. That's not part of it. It's a useful thing. I think it's a good thing to add verses and chapters and all that for reference. Excellent idea. But is subject somewhat to debate. Same thing with the title of many books. Many of the books did not have titles. And the Gospels are among those. They weren't titled, except the title is at the beginning, the Gospel of Jesus Christ. And it doesn't necessarily say according to who. Now this one is, according to someone, the disciple whom Jesus loved, a beloved disciple. But he tries not to mention himself. But what I find interesting here is, for the first time ever in John, because John is not mentioned in John, whereas in the other Gospels he's mentioned, he's mentioned, but not to the extent that he comes out in other Gospels. As far as by name. He was a prominent apostle. But it says here, but they don't even mention the making of apostles here. But the sons of Zebedee. That's John. That was John. John was one of the sons of Zebedee. And so this reference of the sons of Zebedee, now it doesn't say, it doesn't say, and the disciple whom Jesus loved, and two other of his disciples. Though we know the one whom he loves is there, because he's witnessed to all these things. He's the one. That's why this account is this way, because it was his witness. So I do think there is the fact that the sons of Zebedee are mentioned as, and I don't know. It's just, I guess it kind of makes sense to plug that in as John, but, give me a better argument for something else, and I don't know that I could say much to overthrow it, because it doesn't seem particularly strong. But people want to know who did what and who's responsible for this. And if, like Hebrews, it had been written anonymously, it kind of, for the most part, I don't know. It's interesting because for most of my life, I didn't realize the Gospels were written pretty much anonymous. And not all, obviously. Even Luke, it doesn't say Luke, but he's mentioned. in the Acts and stuff. And also, honestly, Luke. One of the interesting things about the Gospel of Luke is and that comes out, and I learned it from my companion Bible, is the prevalence of technical medical terms. We're talking first century medical, but the technical terms that someone who is trained and educated would use, because the Gospel of Luke has a particular vocabulary that is, it reflects a higher sophistication of education by the one who wrote it. And since Luke was a physician, it would have required some education even at that time, to at least in the knowledge of what people had. Just because they didn't have an understanding of a lot of things like germ theory and such, doesn't mean they didn't have, at least some ability to treat, and it couldn't be trained. As far as certainly with the dressing of wounds and stuff, amputation, there's an art to it. And that's been around for a long time. So anyways, after these things, after the events from before, the initial resurrection events, where he appears in the room. There are other times he appears, written in other Gospels. You notice in this one, there's no ascension at the end. He doesn't ascend until Acts anyways. I don't think he ascends. All the Gospels end with Jesus making an appearance and giving some pronouncement. But not the ascent to heaven. Though it says, I ascend to my Father and to your Father, to my God and your God. So now, he shows himself again at the Sea of Tiberias. I'm not going to bother with the location, the geography. There was Peter, Thomas, again, doubting Thomas is there, Nathaniel, the sons of Zebedee, John and James and John. And then Peter and Andrew are brothers, yeah. And that night they go fishing. I raise an eyebrow. I go a-fishing. That doesn't sound like... It doesn't even look like it's printed right. I don't know why I'm interested in it. Well, I'm not gonna digress on that point. It just sounds like... I feel like there ought to be a dash or an apostrophe. I go a-fishing. I'm going fishing. They say unto him, we also go with thee. They went for... Maybe it's some colloquial way of saying it in Greek. I don't know. I'm not going to worry about it. Because it's obvious it means what it says because of the context, right? They caught nothing. They went out and no luck at all. This is why I've never enjoyed fishing very much, because you can spend a whole night doing something and have no productivity at all. It can be very disappointing. Some people love it. I remember I have a lot of people around me who loved fishing. I did it as a kid, because when you go out to the pond to fish, it's purely a chance whether or not you're going to catch anything. Now, if Peter, when Jesus commands you to fish, you go and pull out a fish and then take out a coin and pay your taxes. That was one of the times he says, go get a fish and pull the coin out and pay for me and you. It had a coin in its mouth. He predicted that would be there because he understood where everything was. Or he could, or he had access to that anyways. But also, this totally missing and then totally hitting. It makes you think of many of the things I've learned walking in the Lord. Just that, sometimes circumstances seem like an entire strikeout, where it's you got nothing. Right? You fish all night, nothing. You work on a project and it doesn't seem to bear any fruit, And, there's an analogy that can be drawn to the thing, but overall, I'm just saying conceptually, we oftentimes, you can work really hard at something and find that there is absolutely no fruit in it. But if we are a bit more patient, The Lord will come and we'll get lucky, so to speak. It'll be there. What we need is there. It is provided when we need it. And in this story, it's showing that that we can rely on the Lord's provision. That when the Lord is never far away. When the dawn comes, they spend this night, they go back sort of to the world. They go back to their world. Peter goes back to what he knew. I'm going back to fishing. That's where he was called from. He was a fisherman. And he went back to what he knew. Now he believed Jesus was risen from the dead, but again, it's like I said, when I got the Holy Spirit, the first day I was like, wow, this is the most amazing thing ever. And the next day I was like, and weeks after and months after, but then, it's like, and then years wear on. But like I say, even a week later was already, the glory of the moment had diminished. It had passed. Like I say, when it, sometimes a miracle happens and our belly is filled, so to speak. We feel filled up with God. Oh wow, He's real. He's with us. He's answering our prayers. He's real and present in my life. But then it can seem like He goes away and you become hungry and it's dark and it's night and there's no help. But He's never very far away. And that's why we ought to trust Him, because even in the darkest night, though we go through the whole night and catch nothing, the dawn yet comes, and with it the sun. And of course the sun, it's interesting. In English, the word sun, S-O-N, which I didn't mean the S-O-N. I didn't mean the S-U-N, like the sun. I meant the sun arise. I meant the S-O-N, the Son of God. It's a coincidence in English that they're homophones, the word sun and sun, S-U-N and S-O-N. Because in other languages, they're not, obviously. But it's funny because, the day star arising and the new dawn and the morning star are all symbols of Christ. The light dawning. The people that walked in darkness have seen a great light. Upon, Isaiah chapter 9, and such prophecies of Christ. It's always of the light dawning and the coming forth of the light and the light bringer coming into the world. I mean, you see that symbolism over and over again. Because the sun is also, like the sun, the ultimate light giver. The sun is merely a shadow of what the true sun is, the true source of life and light. The life was the light of men. Men have a light, and we have a responsibility to the light, to not allow it to be extinguished and to hold it up. Because many men would rather the world be in darkness. They would rather the world stay in darkness so that they can do their evil deeds. That's why they hate the light. When you may have noticed recently, there's a lot of exposure being brought to bear on medical establishments that do procedures on young people to permanently alter their sexual characteristics, as far as using drugs and hormones to alter their physical makeup from what it would naturally become. Assuming they have normal, because some people have diseases that prevent them from naturally maturing, and obviously they should have access to medical treatments that would help them. Let's say a young boy is born and he doesn't produce enough testosterone to become a man or something like that. It's like, I don't think there's anything. If they have some disease, they should be supplied with the things to help them live a normal life. But it's not a normal life, what they're doing to people in the name of mental health, which is the most insane process you've ever seen. But people would like that. But when people expose that to light, they get angry. They don't want people to know what they're doing. Yet at the same time, they want what they're doing to be celebrated. And what they want everyone to do is just shut up and let them do what they do and let darkness cover the land. I mean, and that darkness is in our silence. When we see things like that and we're just silent at it, that is the world enshrouded in darkness. Because the true light comes from the Word of God shining forth, and that's when we tell the truth or support the truth and the right things being done. So we see the morning come and Jesus on the shore. They've been unfruitful in their looking for fish. He says, "Children, have you any meat?" I wonder what that word in... I miss my companion Bible right there, because sometimes he's very helpful in providing, like it'll say, "Huon" means little child, a term of affection. Because it's not, because there are many actual, there's a whole appendix on the different words for children in the Companion Bible. That's the thing. I really liked the word studies helps in this Companion Bible by A.W. Bullinger. Some of the doctrinal commentary in the margins is highly questionable. But you should treat every commentary in... Everything I say is highly questionable. Anything I say, you can question. Feel free. Though some of it is probably beyond question, but certainly because I say something doesn't render it out of question, right? So let's see. And so any scholar's opinion it couldn't be questioned. Even stuff that's considered established should be questioned. And then you might just reconfirm, okay, maybe that was an unnecessary explanation. I mean, I did a bit of that where I questioned maybe too thoroughly on some level, and it kind of burned me out at one point because I started studying the Bible. Like I said, I used to sit there with the Green's Interlinear. I'd go through and I'd translate back every word. I'd write down I wrote dozens of... I mean, if you look at some books in my Bible, there's literally just... the margins are crammed with definitions and notes and stuff, and it's like... It was good for what it was worth, but it's not the real deal. It's not what's really going to help me, have God present and active and real in my life. It's good to study the Word. It's good to keep His Word. If a man love me, he will keep my word. My Father will love him. And I'm not saying that it's wrong of you. No way. I wouldn't tell anyone not to do what I did. I'm just saying that may be a necessary part of your bringing up, is to really get down to the nitty gritty and study words and the languages and stuff and structure and even other aspects of things like history and you always keep an open mind when you study what people say, because a lot of people jump to conclusions, or they'll say there's no evidence of this. And it's like, no evidence is not the same as proof against. I mean, always remember that too. Like, oh, there's no evidence. There's no evidence. It's like, well, you mean you haven't seen any evidence. But that doesn't necessarily mean there is no evidence. That means that's another thing, is like some people just get totally... They don't understand what evidence is. They think evidence is just 100% proof. It's like, go sit on a trial sometime and then you see what evidence is. Because I've sat on a trial. Evidence is not just proof. It's everything. Testimony is evidence. It's like the testimony of a liar is evidence. It may not be very reliable evidence, but it's evidence. It ends up in courts of law. All the time you have men who are perjurers stand up on the stand and take an oath to tell the truth again. And it gets read into evidence. Evidence is just the stuff you look at to decide on the truth of things. It can all be manipulated. It can be weak or strong. The evidence of your eyes. But like I said, when things are exciting, when the moment happens, when God intervenes in our life, it's easy to quickly drift away from that. Easier than you might think, even from amazing things. Thomas had been putting his fingers in the wound 1 week, and then was it a week after these things? It didn't say exactly how long ago. Why did I assume it was like a week later? It was just later. But that same thing. One week you're looking at Jesus' wounds, the next week you're you're fishing again. Let's see. I'm just curious when he says that, because it's kind of an interesting way to refer to someone. Let me see. Children, paidion. It's interesting, the word meat is prosphagion, something to eat with your bread, a relish. Interesting. Anyways, again, I don't want to get getting bogged down in the definitions of the words and those things. I find much more interesting the symbology of the story, like I've been talking about. And then he tells them, he gives them something, because some people, I remember my original teacher, Arlen Murray, right into this, and says, this means you should vote right wing, do everything right wing on the right side of the thing. Okay. You shouldn't do everything on the right, by the way. Not necessarily everything there's a lot of things on the right. And what is the right? I mean, it's like, is it just correct? As far as I know, the ways of the Lord are straight. They deviate neither to the right nor the left. That doesn't mean a moderate middle position, which is like the average of, the far left and the far right. Just add them together, divide by 2, and then you get the right answer. It's not how it works. A lot of our politics is divided into this right-left dichotomy, which is mostly BS. It's like we're not all either moving towards one pole or the other. And what is exactly at that pole? It seems to be as soon as you have an idea that's sort of different from maybe a large segment of people, and you may even agree with, you may even have a 50-50 split, but you got two competing sets of ideas. But as soon as you, once we get down the road of, what was I going to say about that? Well, anyways, that right-left dichotomy of like seeing everything as either like, tending, and also the things they stick in it. It's annoying because then it's like you get right. It's like, well, what's your far right? Well, it's Hitler. And what's your left? What's the far? Oh, it's Stalin. They provide, it's like both are sort of like secret fans of the most evil people history could ever come up with. And then of course, both sides on the right side, they're saying, well, Hitler, no, he was actually left. And then on the left, they're saying, well, Stalin, no, he was actually right. And they have all these reasons. Stalin was actually right because he ended up being kind of a nationalist. Oh, Hitler was actually left because he was a socialist. And all this right, it's not, they're all totalitarians, authoritarians. That's what you need to understand. It's like those things are dangerous, especially in the wrong hands. That's the thing, is like you give totalitarian power. I mean, we have incompetent leadership. You look at what's the reason our world is in the most danger it's ever been in is because, I mean, like it's almost prophetic in biblical in its scale, the failure of leadership. Meaning like it harkens back. I mean, it's weird because you think like, well, we gave up hereditary kings. One of the hereditary kings is always it's one of the worst ideas in history. Even the Bible from the beginning says kings are a bad idea. From the beginning. As soon as Israel wanted a king, the guy was like, "Not you want a king?" They wanted a king like the nations around them. This is an ancient truth that kings are a bad idea. But they're a very natural outcome of people interacting with each other in a sinful way. You end up with people who accrue power, and then they use it to crush others and to amass to themselves a kingdom. And it's a problem that's real among human beings. They do this, but you look at. I thought since we got rid of hereditary kings, like the possibility that we'd have a complete incompetent moron who is untalented and unfit, who has no business even being in a position of power. I thought that would never, you'd think that could never happen. That the filter of the electorate would prevent someone who is even mentally damaged from becoming the most powerful person in the entire world. But this has failed. Like the person who's currently president might as well be the ill-begotten son of some, hedonistic and what would we call it? And sadistic nobleman. He might as well be the offspring of some sadistic nobleman who is just there because his dad was powerful. Even though the current leader, the most powerful man in the world, is not there because of his father's power. But he's there, in a way he is. It's funny, it's one of the most astonishing examples of the patriarchy you've ever seen. That they chose him. You know what? They had to go to a doddering old white man. That's the only person they could trot out there that they could believe in. And wow, you know, they used to, in the 90s, they laughed him off the stage when he wanted to be president. And now even the security agencies are bending over backwards to protect him and his family. Because they decide they like an incompetent president. It allows the government to operate on its own freely and go rogue. What I'm saying, though, is right. Don't think that necessarily because it's got the other sticker brand on it, which I make no bones about it. I'm not a 501c3. I'm not a tax-exempt organization. I can tell people to vote Republican if I want, and you probably should. You definitely don't want to vote Democrat with them having basically institutionalizing immorality, institutionalizing human experimentation that's growing that's not growing, but that is actually exponential. It's like rising or sinking, depending on which analogy you prefer, towards, you know, Dr. Moreau level of insane science fiction, human experimentation, animal-human hybrids, all the stuff Alex Jones used to get laughed at about is what it's a small group of people, but who are gaining influence, who would push that kind of like thing on people, on society generally. Because again, at first it becomes voluntary, but you better clap. You know, you have to, you know, it's all voluntary, but God help you if you don't applaud. You know, and you better smile. No face crimes. But that's where they want to go. You know, it is Sodom and Gomorrah culture. You know, they want to know every aspect of your life. They want to get to know you in the most intimate possible ways. You know, they want no one to have a truly private existence. Not that anyone really does. All things are naked and open before him whom we have to do. That's why we're called to righteousness, because we don't, you know, God has called us to live an open life, but not one that is openly debauched, that belongs in darkness. You know, not that, and that's the funny thing, is like, you know, men love the darkness because their works are evil. But there is a point at which they become so evil, like the kind of pleasure to riot in the daytime. Spots they are in blemishes, sporting themselves with their own deceivings. Having eyes full of adultery, which cannot cease from sin. Yeah, I don't think there is a right. The idea that that this is a clue that you should always assume that the right side is the right way to go. I say neither right nor left. Look, at the Lord's ways are straight. They deviate neither to the right nor the left. They are the true correct. Right in the sense of correct. Yeah, there is a right way to do things and a wrong way. But left and right, as far as the hands, are not synonymous with right and wrong. You know, my left hand isn't wrong and my right hand is right. And the right ship is not wrong. I mean, the left side of the ship is not wrong and the right ship right. I again, like many things, I would say this is arbitrary. The choice of right over left is somewhat arbitrary. Because there's you either cast the net off the right side of the boat or the left. He's just picking a side. And at the point is like you know the difference of like the side of the ship. Like there's a gag here. You know what I mean? Like if you've ever gone fishing, like, you know, There's this feeling like that where if someone is sitting in a certain spot and they get lucky and you kind of want to go there, because even though they just took the fish out of that spot, it seems like that's the spot where they're biting, right? Are they biting? That's another question people will ask, because there's a sort of there's a lot of superstition around fishing. There is. Ask anyone who fish, not that it's all hard grained, but you feel it a bit if you've ever gone fishing because of the element of luck. You don't know, it's like maybe if you do things a little different, it's gonna go better. At least that's how it always seemed mystical and magical to me, because I was never particularly good at fishing. And I think particularly because I didn't have the patience for it as a kid. I found it colossally boring. So if I wasn't catching something, it was extremely disappointing. Like some people, I think they could go fishing and just sit there and fish all day and just enjoy nature and stuff, and not in the slow, patient thing. I know some dudes love that, go out in their little rowboat, with a 6-pack and spend the whole afternoon, and they're nothing wrong with that. I'm meaning in moderation. But I don't get it. To me, that's not for me. I think it's arbitrary, though. He just said, because like I said, like we're talking how wide the ship's there's 10 feet away. I mean, you're not. What I'm saying is, casting on the right or left doesn't really make a big difference. But what makes a difference is obedience to the Lord. And there are so many examples of this throughout the Bible. For example, like there was an occasion where the prophet tells the king, take this. He gives him a sword and tells him to smite. I thought if it was it a sword or a stick? It was basically a bunch of sticks. He wanted him to hit the ground with the sword or smite the sticks. I forgot exactly how it went. But the king kind of, I should look up that story and refresh my mind. But the king takes the sword and he just kind of like taps on it. He doesn't really smite it. He just hits it a few times. And the prophet's angry because it was supposed to be a symbolic moment. He was supposed to take that sword and smash those sticks many times. And he says, if you had done that, you would have defeated your enemies until you had consumed them. But because you didn't take my sign seriously, basically, and I'm paraphrasing, you will beat them, but they will remain. And they will grow strong again, and then in the days after you, it won't be so good. And so, it matters that they listen. He says, cast on the right side. Okay, we'll cast on the right side, and boom. Because there's no reason, like, the right side isn't special. They probably cast out the right side, and what were they doing the left side all night? And now it's the right side? If they had only done on the right side, they would have caught fish sooner. Well, no, there's nothing special about the right side of that boat. It was only because in that moment, Jesus told them to cast the net where he said to cast it. He said, cast it here. It was because he designated where to cast it. I said, right and left is arbitrary. I said, I don't ascribe to being right or left. I mean, I do generally, of course, because the whole world says we're right wing, because if you're at all conservative, or at least have conservative sympathies, which is more the way I would describe myself. Because most people don't, in my life, people do not think of me as, many people think of me as conservative, of course, but I also encounter a great number, equally so, who do not think of me as conservative at all. I met someone this summer who said, "You're a wild man, aren't you?" That was his assessment. He'd seen some things that I do and described me as a wild man. And of course, my retort to that was, well, I have a wife and 7 kids, and that's kind of a wild life, but, it's hard to call someone wild who, and only not that I get offended at being called wild, but I know my wife probably wouldn't like that because she doesn't think of me as wild, and she prefers probably other people not to think of me as some sort of wild, crazy character, because the truth is I'm not. But from the perspective of someone who's really conservative, not just who thinks that the good things should be preserved, but that who does that without even thinking. Like I came to that conclusion. Well, the reason I still have that conclusion, the reason I'm still on the right side of the aisle, so to speak, I guess, because I started out that way. Well, because like a lot of things, I did honestly look at them and challenge them, and I still feel like this is where I belong. Relative. I think more of the right, correct answers are on the side of the right, which is now called right. Whereas I hate these general labels. It's like it'd be better, much more useful to be specific about what people care about. The policies and all that. But honestly, do people really care about all that nonsense? I don't. For like 8 years, for the whole Obama presidency, I kind of checked out of politics. I didn't pay attention. Even now, I sort of feel, sometimes I feel like, I don't want to pay attention. And I don't pay that much attention to the political side of it because I hate politics itself, like the actual but the cultural, to me, what interests me much more is the culture war. And yes, to me, it's not about right and left, it's about right and wrong. It's not about that direction, like who wants to pull this way or that way. Are we going towards Hitler or Stalin? To me, it's like, why do we have to be pulling towards two negatives? Why is it even set? Why are we told that's what we're doing? Like, who's feeding us this idea? So now, of course, they're casting the net on the right side. They find tons of fish. The disciple whom Jesus loved said unto Peter, he's there. Is he one of the sons of Zebedee or one of the other disciples? We know this is the author of this gospel, but is it truly John? I'll tell you what, the epistles also labeled from John, the elder, do have numerous linguistic similarities to the Gospel of John. So, and I believe the epistles of John, especially 1 John, again. Yeah. No, it doesn't. Again, the Epistle of John is not autographed. I think that the second and third ones are, though. Now, again, the elder. I don't know. See, some of the books do have, like, to the Philippians and stuff like that, they have, like, sort of traditional titles that make sense because they were addressed that way. But as far as, the epistles of John do not, I believe, have a precise level. But they do seem definitely related to the Gospel of John. If I haven't done the epistles of John, maybe we'll do those right after John. Just so you can kind of see. That word meno and monet, the abide, I believe it shows up. And some other characteristic words of the Gospel of John show up in the epistles of John. There's a similarity of style. So they were not able to draw in the multitude now because they were obedient to the Lord. Because they did it where he said to do it. Now that disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, and again, I think that whom Jesus loved is a term of humility. He means it humbly. Because I think on some level, writing this story of Jesus, the gospel, with a lot of I did this and I did that and I was there, probably felt to him a bit, he felt more comfortable writing about himself in the third person. And I understand that. It's the same, I don't like that aspect of ministry that demands of some people that they put themselves out and ask for assistance to help me continue my work. It's like, I'm always working on myself, and I'm always glad to share that work with others who are interested in. If nobody has to listen. That's the beauty of it, because you're not paying for it. There's no, there's just, it's there. That's it. I like that. Because I think it is good to share in your abundance. If the Lord is good to you, to share that with others. And I don't, people always think about money. It's like I said that and I realized, oh, some people are going to think money. I'm not thinking about money. I'm thinking about the abundance of the relationship. I'm thinking about the abundance of the Spirit. So now that he notices that he says, that's the Lord. He, of course, the fishes thing. Now he girded on his fisher's coat, for he was naked. I learned that they say, my naked meant in his underwear. That's what's. I don't know why. I mean, it doesn't necessarily. So what I'm saying, it could mean that. You don't assume it meant he was buck naked. Naked as the day he was born. Naked as a jaybird, as my old teacher used to say, right? He wasn't necessarily naked like that. Well, he was more like naked like a jaybird than like a plucked chicken. Okay. Because the jaybird isn't exactly naked. That's another funny thing. Because birds have a natural covering. They have their feathers, Human beings, we don't have fur. If I had fur all over my body, I don't think I'd be so self-conscious about nudity, But even then, point is, a man in a loincloth would be seen as unclothed. He's not technically nude. I'm not even sure. The word naked might mean in Greek unclothed, which again, like I say, is not the same as nude. Let's look it up real quick because I'm gambling on that one. I feel like I think I might have a point there. Or that would be certainly, let me put it, that would be convenient. That would be convenient. For he was naked. All right, there we go, naked. Oh, I got it right there. See it? Gumnos. What? I'm not familiar with this word. Gumnos. Definition, naked or poorly clothed. See, someone who is poorly clothed could be called naked. Meaning, they weren't like, let's say you, the word could be used like, let's say you go out in the wintertime in just shorts and a t-shirt. You're naked. You're exposed. You know what I mean? That's what the idea is. You're exposed. Like, because you can be exposed to the elements and not be totally naked. So it does not necessarily mean having genitals born. Yeah, without clothing. So, again, so it means it has more the force of unclothedness. Meaning not having appropriate clothes. Because he again, probably for polite society. For fishing, he was stripped down because he was out there working on the water. It was probably warm, whatever, And so he was stripped down without his stuff. So he binds his fisher coat on him and throws himself into the water and swims right down. They weren't far off. 200 cubits. A cubit is like the length of your elbow to your fingertip, about, depending on whose elbow to fingertip you're talking about. That could be about like 2 feet. So we're looking about 200 feet. Or no, I'm sorry, 400 feet. About a football field, right? Football field and a half. They're out a bit, but not so far. Far enough where they could hear him yelling to them across the water. Children, have you any fishes? But not immediately recognize him, even though we've already demonstrated that Jesus can be right in front of you and people fail to recognize him, which is, again, when it talks about God revealing himself to us. We need God to reveal himself to us, but the frightening thing is, what if he reveals himself to us and I don't recognize him? That's why I said, I want to be careful. Now you seek to kill me, a man that hath told you the truth. And I realized, boy, I've felt that at times. I was angry with someone for telling me the truth. And I had the heart that the Pharisees had. That when the truth came against me, instead of, just like, David, before the prophet Nathan told him that he was the man. He was angered when he heard about what was done. But then when it was him, it was, it's like we have to be careful we don't allow ourselves iniquity that we forbid to others. So anyways, they're only they're dragging the net with the fishes. They come to land. And they saw a fire of coals and fish. Jesus already had his own fish, though. And bread. And then it says, bring the fish which you have now caught. And Peter went up and drew the net to the land, and it was full of great big ones, a bunch of big ones. 153. Gosh, there was something about this number, and I totally forget. 153, I know it's obviously a multiple of 3. It gives you 51, right? 51 times 3 is 51. Another, 51 is a multiply. It's like 3 times 3 times 7 would be the 3 times 7 times 3 is 63. What am I thinking? No. It's 50, 51. Wait, 21 and 20. No, that doesn't divide down, does it? With 30, 10. Oh, I'm sorry. It's 13 times 3. No, not 13 times 3. Why can't I do math? 13 times 3. That's 39. Wait, 30 times 10 and 17. What are you, Paul? Come on. 17. 17 times 3 times 3. Or 9 times 17. That's the prime factorization. So there's I remember there's some book or part or appendix. I think there may even be appendix in the Companion Bible that has to do with that number and the symbology with it. But I remember reading it and finding it fascinating, but I don't know necessarily it's the type of thing I would particularly point out as far as break down in one of my studies, because one, I always find the numerology type, it's not numerology, but the number symbolism, it's definitely a thing, but I always want to be careful about reading too much into, numbers. Because it has certain numbers come up with certain symbolic, a consistent symbolic meaning throughout the Bible, like 7 being a number of completeness, but that it's the number of spiritual completeness. Well, that always seemed to me I'm like, are we sure we're ready to say that? It does represent some sort of perfection. But then again, doesn't every number represent a kind of perfection in its, in its realm? Being complete, 3 and 3 is complete in itself as 3. It may not seem like a big deal, but it is the basis of logic. Like A is not A. A equals A. 3 equals 3. As obvious as that is, it's one of the first tenets of, just understanding reality, the nature of things. Was there anything about the numbers here? Where was the number? 153 is verse 11. So I have anything that 153. Yeah, I forgot where that number came up. It was where I'd heard that there was someone had done some sort of symbolic breakdown, and I think that I liked it, and that's why I'm talking about it. Something you could, if that subject interests you. Yeah, was the net broken? Well, that's good. It was the amount we can assume that would be taxing to the net. Otherwise, it would not be mentioned that the net was not broken. In fact, they would have thought, they may have marveled a bit that it wasn't broken because it's mentioned. That makes me assume that it was quite overfilled, because they were large fishes. And Jesus says, come and dine. That reminds me, this whole thing, it reminds me of the symbology of Revelation when it says, behold, I stand at the door and knock. If any man open the door, I will come into him and sup with him and he with me. And he says, come and dine, come sit with me. This is part of what Jesus does in coming to us from the dead. He comes to join us like this, around the fire, in a intimate setting, as if you would dine with him. It's something just so common in the human experience to eat together. It's considered a normal sort of courtship, when a man courts a woman, to suggest dining together. It's something that married couples do. So it is a kind of practice. Can we stand each other at meat? If you can't, if you're, do you disgust me as I watch you eat? It's a good question to answer early on. Though I've often advised single people, I'm like, don't take people on dates to restaurants. It's incredibly uncomfortable. You have nothing to talk about except the menu. And you may, if you're good at conversation, you could probably, I'm just saying for people who are not, which is most people, don't go to a restaurant. Go someplace interesting. Go to a museum. Then maybe go out to eat afterwards or something. But do something fun first. Do something that gives you something opportunity to be comfortable. I don't know why I'm giving that advice. Well, because I know it's important to find the right mate. You gotta be looking at the right characteristics. But it's also good to do something that isn't too awkward. So the other person can just be themselves, hopefully. And not be in this very microscopic kind of fishbowl environment where you're just staring at each other. And as you're just trying to get to know someone. I was just thought that seems like a bad idea. So he takes bread, gives it to them, fish likewise. He feeds them. Then none of them asked who it was. They just knew who it was. This is the third time. According to this, it's the very third time. Whatever else is told elsewhere, you got to fit this in as the third time. So when they had dined, again, it could be just showed him to his disciples collectively. I don't know, because like I said, I haven't written like a little diagram of all the people who were at exact places at what time, but I know that some people who do, like I said, have struggled with it. But I take that as like, it's like, that's not. I'm not worried by that. For some people, that is a big problem. Again, because like if I should allow that to blind me and put blinders on, it's like, okay, I won't consider that. I won't look at it. To me, it's like, how can I come before God honestly and in faith if the word I say is his own? I can't even talk about it truthfully or honestly. I can't just honestly speak what I think when I read it and the challenges that it gives me. Because I accept it as authoritative, but I also know that, like, I think, like I said, I think of the way Jesus would speak of it sometimes, and I think, like, well, it is also written in your law that the testimony of two men is true. They're calling it their law and stuff. Even his attitude toward, Moses wrote this after the hardness of your hearts, as far as the adultery and stuff, allowing the writing of a divorcement. He emphasized Moses' role in that over it being by divine decree, so to speak. Because ultimately the righteousness which is of the law is carnal. It speaks to the carnal thing, to make the carnal do what is acceptable before God, to try to make the carnal acceptable. But ultimately it just, man cannot live up to God's standards. And that's why Christ came. So that in coming, he would provide a way that through faith we could enter into life eternal. Everlasting life, I should say. Okay, and I think I'm at an hour. I wanted to finish this, but there's no way I'm going to rush this last chapter. The last study may be a little short. May not be, though, because there's actually plenty to be said here. But even so, it may end short tomorrow. And then we will start a new book soon thereafter, possibly this week. I don't intend to take any kind of break as far as like to stop studies, but, and I was thinking about, there have been a lot of smaller studies I've wanted to do, and I've talked about this for a long time, like doing it between books. But frankly, it's a lot easier to just start a new book, and I do enjoy doing the whole books, and the preparation for that is already done, so it's kind of tempting to continue. So we'll think about that. I'm going to probably look to do something a little shorter and then go back to something longer again. All right, well, thanks for joining this study. I'll be back again tomorrow to conclude the Gospel of John. Until then.
Mine as the Father knoweth me, even so know I the Father, and I lay down my life for the sheep. And other sheep I have, which are not of this fold. Them also I must bring, and they shall hear my voice, and there shall be one fold and one shepherd. Therefore doth my Father love me, because I lay down my life that I might take it again. No man taketh it from me, but I lay it down of myself. I have power